It was a cold, foggy morning in London. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson were sitting in their cozy apartment at 221B Baker Street. Holmes was playing his violin while Watson was reading the newspaper. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. "Come in," said Holmes. A young woman entered the room. She was dressed in expensive clothes, but her face looked worried. "Mr. Holmes, please help me," she said. "My sister, Clara, has disappeared." Holmes put down his violin and leaned forward. "Tell me everything," he said. The woman introduced herself as Miss Emily Blackwood. Her sister, Clara, was the heiress to the Blackwood fortune. Claire had gone to a party 2 nights ago and never returned home. "Did she go to the party alone?" asked Holmes. "No," said Emily. "She went with her fiancé, Mr. Edward Grey. But Edward says he last saw her at the party, and he doesn't know where she went." Holmes stood up and put on his coat. "Watson, we have work to do. The investigation begins." Holmes and Watson went to the Blackwood mansion. It was a large, old house with many rooms. Holmes examined Clara's bedroom. He noticed that her jewelry box was open and empty. "Was your sister wearing any jewelry the night she disappeared?" Holmes asked Emily. "Yes," said Emily. "She was wearing her diamond necklace and pearl earrings." Holmes nodded. "Interesting." Next, Holmes and Watson went to the party venue. It was a grand hall in the center of London. Holmes spoke to the staff and guests. One waiter remembered seeing Claire arguing with a man in a black coat. "Did you see the man's face?" asked Holmes. "No," said the waiter, "but he had a scar on his hand." Holmes thanked the waiter and left. The suspects. Holmes and Watson went to visit Edward Grey, Clara's fiancé. Edward was a tall, handsome man, but he seemed nervous. "Mr. Grey," said Holmes, "where were you after the party?" "I went home," said Edward. "I was tired." "Did you see anyone with a scar on their hand at the party?" asked Holmes. Edward's face turned pale. "No, I didn't," he said quickly. Holmes noticed Edward's reaction, but said nothing. As they left, Holmes turned to Watson. "Edward is hiding something. The clue in the alley." Holmes and Watson went to the alley behind the party hall. Holmes found a small piece of fabric caught on a nail. It was from a black coat. He also found a pearl earring on the ground. "This is Claire's earring," said Watson. "Yes," said Holmes, "and the fabric matches the description of the man with the scar. The break in the case." Holmes decided to visit a local pawn shop. He showed the owner Clara's photo and described her jewelry. "Yes," said the owner, "a man with a scar on his hand sold me a diamond necklace yesterday." Holmes smiled. "Now we're getting somewhere." The confrontation. Holmes and Watson went back to Edward Grey's house. This time, Holmes was more direct. "Mr. Grey," said Holmes, "we know you sold Clara's necklace to a pawn shop. Where is she?" Edward broke down. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he cried. "I just wanted the money. Clara found out and threatened to call the police. I panicked and locked her in an old warehouse." The rescue. Holmes and Watson rushed to the warehouse. They found Claire tied up but unharmed. She was relieved to see them. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes," she said. "I knew you would find me." The conclusion. Edward Grey was arrested, and Claire returned home safely. Holmes and Watson went back to Baker Street. "Another successful case," said Watson. "Indeed," said Holmes. "But the real mystery is why people think they can outsmart me." Watson laughed. "You're the greatest detective in the world, Holmes." Holmes smiled and picked up his violin. "Elementary, my dear Watson. Elementary."